I'm going to add on to that then. I'm going to talk about the battle of the wingmen, seeing as this kind of ties into what you were saying.
Okay.
Since we started doing this sort of talking points format that we started in, when did we start it?
It was the beginning.
It wasn't the first one.
It wasn't Bahrain. It was the second race of the year.
We decided very intelligently to do a big format change the second episode of our new season. Obviously, things very, very well thought out here at Race Per Minute. But yeah, since we started doing these talking points, we've had some topics come up most races, right? Which is great. And this is one of them, the sort of battle of the wingmen that has emerged from this championship. Well, kick us off, Shane. What are your thoughts on Perez and Bottas in comparison this weekend?
Okay, I've got a little bit of a paragraph here, and then I'm sure we'll talk about this for a good 10 minutes, because it's getting to the point in this championship where it matters now. The battle of the wingmen, it really does matter.
Well, it's always mattered.
It has now, but it's highlighted even more now. So, bit of an underwhelming performance from Bottas in this race, not making up the positions when he really needed to, whereas Perez was doing exactly what he needed to in this race, being involved somewhat in the strategy and putting pressure on Max and Lewis, making sure that Lewis couldn't hang back for much longer, especially in the first pit stop phase. Now, if you had asked me at the summer break whether Red Bull would have been able to catch Mercedes in the Constructor Championship, I would have probably said no, because you've got Hamilton and Bottas who are quite comfortable and not on each other's pace, but Bottas can do a decent job on the right weekend. And then you've got Max and Perez, and he's allowed to be a little bit slower because he's in a brand new car. Is it this year? Is this his first year in Red Bull?
Perez?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
This is his first season there. Yeah?
So we're allowed to, he's allowed to be a little bit off Max's pace because it's his first year in a brand new car, etc., etc. But now with 5 races to go at the end of the US Grand Prix, there's 23 points separating Mercedes and Red Bull. 23 points. That is it. That has come down so much over the last 4 races. It was like 50, 60 points, and now it's just one race. It's a DNF for one of those drivers. And Red Bull are leading both championships. Now, the point I'm trying to get to is how important now, how much more important is it now that Bottas starts performing at the role he needs to perform in and in the place he needs to perform in? Because Mercedes, as it stands, risk losing both championships. And it's heading in that direction. I hate to say it, but it's heading in that direction. It's mainly because of the wingmen. And I mean that in a sense that Perez was in P3. He could have influenced the strategy if he really wanted to. He needed to be a little bit faster. But Bottas, despite the penalty, but this year we've seen him drop down in the grid due to poor starts or not making his way through the grid when he's received an engine penalty. And that's really impacting Mercedes. So what do you do? It's not good.
Yeah, I'd like to head off any potential thoughts of Bottas maybe not caring much because he's not going to be in a Mercedes next year.
Oh, if that came across at all, then I apologise. That's not what I was trying to...
Not from you.
Okay, good.
Not from you, but anybody who might be feeling that way about Bottas. Because personally, I think that he's more of a professional than that.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't think it would do him any favours to behave in such a way. Nobody wants a driver that's going to behave like that. So I don't think that's it at all. I think what we're seeing is just, as I've, again, that same thing that I always said, like, this is just what Bottas does. Like this, what we're seeing is what he does. I don't think much has changed because of that Alpha announcement at all, if anything. But looking at Bottas in this race, he really seemed to struggle at the start, like you said. He lost out to both Alpha Tauris right at on the first few laps when he really needed to quickly overturn the deficit from his component penalty. Started P9, obviously, because of that. I did find myself wanting Bottas to overtake Sainz for P6 on about lap 50 odd, because that meant that Ferrari would score fewer points relative to McLaren. That was the only time that I was kind of rooting for him, if you like. But otherwise, it was just a bit too sluggish. Like, he had the advantage, but not enough of an advantage to crawl further up the grid, and ultimately didn't even really get close at any point eventually to Ricciardo and Leclerc. Like, it was just too little too late by that point. He might have been able, if he could have had anything like his teammates' pace, he might have been closer to making something happen in regards to the podium positions, but it just never really happened. But then the same was sort of true, as you said, of Perez. Like, he was on the podium, but he also kind of wasn't quite where he needs to be. He was just too far back. Hamilton could pit whenever he wanted. He said he obviously ran out of water, very hot location. Said afterwards it was like probably the most physical race he's had to do so far, so I feel for him there. He had a very promising weekend up to that point. He was decent throughout the practice sessions, put it in P3 for the qualifying, and even had a little look at his teammate.
He did.
On lap 1, he had a little look, I thought.
Sensibly backed out.
Yeah, very, very sensibly backed out. But when it really mattered for the outcome of the race, he was kind of out of the picture. But that said, back-to-back podiums for the second time this season, I think. It's more what we expected from Perez. So Perez coming out of this looking better, I think. Certainly, obviously scoring more points. But still, there's that deficit because Max and Lewis are so exceptional and are so fast that it's just they are off in their own category out in the distance, and it's almost become an impossible task for any teammate to hope to get near to them. Maybe that will change next year with George Russell at Mercedes. We'll see.
But the cars are changing as well, aren't they? So
and the cars are changing, so it's just another factor to muddy the waters a little bit. But it certainly makes things very interesting. Yeah, the Battle of the Wingmen continues to be fascinating. Kind of too close to call.
Yeah.
But very, very interesting to watch. And,
it's interesting that I tweeted a couple of times yesterday that I was like, Lewis and Max are in a different league. They are in a different spec formula to everyone else. Like Perez was 42 seconds off P1. That's crazy. That's more than half a lap behind his teammate in P1. Bottas, for all it's worth, was 80 seconds off P1. He was almost lapped, and he only started 30 meters behind him on the starting grid. And I know there's traffic and people say that this track isn't really great for overtaking, but there's some heavy braking zones, turn 1 being one of them. Well, actually, no, forget that. We saw loads of overtakes this race. Back in 2019, it was the third most overtakes in a race apart from lap 1, which so goes to show that you can overtake here. But for some reason, Bottas just doesn't really feel comfortable pulling off these moves. Bottas is more of a get into the lead and defend kind of driver than a try and overtake 4 positions or trying to get into the win kind of driver. But yeah, to be 40 seconds off your teammate and then to be 80 seconds off your teammate, that's not good. It's just crazy where these drivers are. And it's just Hamilton and Verstappen. It's just in a different league. They really are. And it's really highlighted this race. It was such a clean race as well. It was really clean.
Yeah, definitely no shortage of overtakes at this circuit or this event. So I don't think that's is a problem with the track there. And his fastest lap was, it was about 1.8 tenths or thereabout slower than Hamilton's fastest lap. So when Hamilton was really pushing, there was a significant difference between the two of them. So yeah, there was still a big deficit there, and I don't think that's a surprise. I don't think anyone should be surprised by that.
Bottas was also running new engine parts as well. Like, I know this is his sixth ICE, I believe, this year. I'm not sure the ins and outs of why he's now taken 2 penalties in the last 5 races, hasn't he? Which isn't great, and obviously it's not, Bottas clearly doesn't like getting 5 place grid penalties and starting halfway down the grid, but he's got fresher parts, so in simple terms, he should be able to push for harder and for longer and has that reliability, but he just doesn't seem to make that moves. He gained 3 positions in this race, and that just seems a bit underwhelming.